ODSTs. There's something fantastically grounded and gritty and visceral and borderline real about the orbital drop shock troopers. Even so far back as Halo 2, when I first saw those matte black clad soldiers, I wondered at what they were, and it didn't take long for me to look into the lore and find exactly what they were. They were given a really awesome graphical update in Halo 3, and again, I just looked at them, and despite the fact I was the Master Chief, I was a Spartan 2 super soldier, these ODSTs were interesting, they were intriguing, they were almost enigmatic. The stories spoke about the ODSTs in many of the earlier novels, very clearly outlined that these were hardcore soldiers capable of doing nearly anything. Yes, they didn't do it with the super soldier physical prowess of the Spartans, but the grounded, gritty reality of the ODSTs made them all the more heroic. Because they were, in the purest meaning of the word, just human. The rich narrative that was being threaded through the books and expanding their history and their training and particular emphasis put on the infamous 105th Division only added to this cool factor of these enigmatic ODSTs. So you can imagine my glee, and many other fans' glee, when Halo 3 ODST, or rather at the time Halo 3 Recon, was first announced. For the first time in the Halo franchise, we were taking off Mjolnir-powered assault armor, the pinnacle edge of armored technology within the Halo universe, and we were downgrading to become just humans. But humans wearing the matte black BDUs of the ODSTs, donning the glorious helmet and the blue polarized visor, clearly differentiating us from Spartans. The game was visceral. You felt vulnerable. You were just a human wearing body armor fighting against huge, powerful aliens. You skulked around a dark city at night, hiding from enemies where you could, and when you were forced to engage, really picking your shots and using hit and run tactics, and if you were in a larger than one fire team, coordinating your efforts and flanking and performing pinch maneuvers as best you can to deal with each confrontation as you came across them. It gave a level of strategic and tactical edge that, while it hadn't been lacking in the Halo universe, definitely emphasized the need for tactics and strategy above just the running and gunning that we'd gotten used to playing as a 7-foot-tall, half-ton super soldier. Even the day that I picked up the game, I went to the midnight launch of Halo 3 ODST at a Blockbuster, just a 10-minute walk from where I used to live. That night was, rightly so, very dark, a little chilly, and, more importantly, a little drizzly. The doors opened at midnight, I stormed in, I got my copy of Halo 3 ODST, and I ran home, in the rain. The disc went into the drive, and I spent the entire night playing the campaign from start to finish, and it left an indelible mark. Even before the launch of Halo 3 ODST, ODSTs were something of a fan favourite, but now that it had launched, the ODSTs had galvanised themselves as being fan favourites, and ever since there has been prominent demand for the ODSTs, and that's the subject of today's video. Really, since their last appearance in any campaign, which was Halo Reach in 2010, the ODSTs have been absent from any further Halo campaign, with the exception of Halo Wars, or rather, Halo Wars 2. So, if you'll excuse the pun, where in the hell are the ODSTs? Cue the intro. That was probably a slightly longer intro than I was initially comfortable with, but I'm so passionate about the ODSTs, I went off script quite considerably there and ad-libbed a large portion of that. So I think let's get back to the script and actually tackle where the hell the ODSTs have disappeared to. Because they're not entirely absent, it's just we haven't really heard from them. So let's give this a little bit of a breakdown. So first and foremost, let's give a very, very brief history of the ODSTs. The orbital drop shock troopers in their current form saw their advent in 2163 with the formation of the UNSC Marine Corps and the UNSC itself from Earth's disparate national military forces. That year also saw the first extraterrestrial deployment of UNSC Marines in the Mars campaign against the neo-communist Kosleviks. In this instance, the need for the HEV or Human Entry Vehicle, an earlier precursor to the SOEV or Single Occupant Exo-Atmospheric Insertion Vehicle, became a necessity, as the troopers' deployment was no longer just hampered by low temperatures and thin atmosphere, but by an atmospheric re-entry. Since this particular conflict took place on Mars, the need to travel from Earth to Mars and then deploy the troopers safely groundside was a deciding factor in the insertion method. When entering an atmosphere, an object experiences atmospheric drag, which puts mechanical stress on the object and aerodynamic heating, caused mostly by the compression of air in front of the object, but also by drag, reaching temperatures of 1600 degrees C or around 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. Needless to say, these conditions are inhospitable, but by employing similar techniques used by spacecraft for centuries, the newly formed UNSC Marine Corps would work around this issue, creating pods that a trooper could climb into and be dropped onto a planet with sufficient heatproofing and insulation, drag chutes and thrusters to safely deploy a trooper from space to the ground with tolerably low casualty rates. Thus, the ODSTs were born.
Freedom fighters across the galaxy and others listening in. UNSC only promises lies. Keep it tight, team. The UNSC came to keep a few things out of our halls. So what is your loyalty line with them?
Obviously, as we know, the ODSTs featured extremely heavily in the closing years, months, and days of the Human Covenant War. ODSTs were present during the fall of Reach. We know that, we saw them. ODSTs were present on Installation 04. ODSTs accompanied the Master Chief and in amber clad to Installation 05. While that was happening, there were ODSTs on the ground in New Mombasa fighting back the Covenant invasion. And indeed, the ODSTs followed the Chief and the Elite to the Ark, where they gave heavy support and assisted in the final fall of the Covenant. When the Chief and the Arbiter ordered their forces retreat back through the portal so that they could activate the replacement Halo and destroy the Flood once and for all, we quite rightly assumed that whatever would come next, there would rightly be a place for the ODSTs. We were wrong. Halo 4 released, and there were no ODSTs. Halo 5 released, and there were no ODSTs. Halo Infinite released, and there were no ODSTs. So, what the hell happened? Well, strictly speaking, in the extended narrative, the ODSTs never disappeared. In fact, they're still there. The law states quite clearly that the ODSTs are still an operational unit. They're still in active service, in spite of not hearing much about them since the end of the war. We know that the 3rd Helljumper platoon participated in the Battle of Drtheus 5, back in 2554 against Mergvol's Covenant. We know that in the following year, a small fire team pulled from ODST Squad Alpha 9 fought at an unknown United Rebel Front facility on the moon Talitsa. Apparently, there's an entire battalion of ODSTs aboard the UNSC Infinity as of 2558. We haven't seen any of them at all, but they're there. Indeed, the ODST's 9th Shock Battalion is still aboard the UNSC Spirit of Fire, and obviously saw action against the Banished during the events of Halo Wars 2, and the Second Ark conflict in 2559. We're very close to modern day in the Halo universe right now. Yet aside from this, have we seen any ODSTs in gameplay since? No. So why? Why haven't we seen them? Well, there's a good chance that there's a few reasons. A couple of narrative reasons and one that isn't such a narrative reason. One of the narrative reasons is that it's quite possibly a symptom of the created rule of the galaxy. You have to remember that Cortana took control of the galaxy. Humanity refused to bow. Many of the other races accepted her rule. Humanity didn't. And when we didn't, she sent Guardians to practically all of our major colonies and used EMP blasts against those colonies, basically plunging them and any ships orbiting those colonies and any space stations orbiting those colonies back to the Stone Age. Any crew aboard those ships and space stations, they're probably dead now. The ships would have drifted through space with no power. That means no oxygen filtration, that means no scrubbing of carbon dioxide, no food or provisions, no heating. They're probably dead. And any forces actually groundside have no technology, no means of communication, no means for calling for help. That's possibly a very big narrative reason as to why we haven't heard much from the ODSTs. But again, there's a large contingent of ODSTs on the Infinity, and yet we've been with the Infinity pretty much solidly since the last appearance of the ODSTs, and yet we still haven't seen them. So, what's another reason that may explain it? Well, the main storyline that we're currently experiencing in the Halo universe is focusing, unsurprisingly, on the Master Chief. We followed Chief and his escape from Requiem. We followed Chief with his searching for Cortana during Halo 5, and we followed Chief and his return following the fall of the Infinity to the Banished. We've been focusing entirely on the Chief. Now, of course, he's the figurehead of the franchise, it kind of makes sense, but it doesn't detract from the fact that there are side stories to be told in this universe. Thousands of side stories that are rich in narrative and ripe for exploration that haven't been. The last narrative reason, at least I can think of, is the Spartan 4s. Now, some of the ODSTs were recruited into the Spartan 4 program following the end of the Human Covenant War. Some of the ODSTs. But you see, the issue that we have here is that the Spartan 4s, although they are Spartans in a loose kind of a way, they also kind of fill something of a interim position between fully fledged Spartans and ODSTs. They can do basically everything that ODSTs can do, and they can do it better. Because they have the benefit of augmentations, they have the benefit of Mjolnir Gen 2 powered assault armor. They have those traits going for them that allow them to be more operationally effective and, in a loose kind of a sense, more quote-unquote appealing, at least at face value, than the ODSTs. I mean, they're more numerous. They become you can have your own level of customization. They canonized the multiplayer since Halo 4, meaning that by definition your Spartan 4 since Halo 4 is actually an in-universe Spartan. That lends itself to player immersion and customization and actually grounding the player within the universe. That has its perks, that has its benefits, but it still doesn't detract from the fact that we still want ODST stories. We still want side stories that perhaps don't involve the Spartans. Because from time to time, it's good to feel vulnerable. It's good to strip the armor off and realize just how long odds we're dealing with against alien aggressors like the Covenant and the Banished. Those are the narrative reasons I can think of, at least, as to why we haven't heard much from the ODSTs since. And they're relatively good reasons, but the real reason, when we really strip away all of that, is this. 343 just haven't made any games for the ODSTs. They're not particularly interested in looking at the ODSTs at the moment. This is a shame. Now, I'm not going to suddenly turn this video around and start shitting all over 343 Industries, because that's not really my style, it never has been. I'm more happy to have a conversation and highlight some key points that I think perhaps need attention, and then leave it at that. But I do believe there's a big misstep there. We have been asking for quite a long time to have other stories be told in the Halo universe. That's why Halo Reach and Halo ODST were so goddamn popular. Halo ODST, you weren't even a Spartan. You were just a human wearing ODST body armor. Halo Reach, you weren't the Spartan. You weren't playing as the Master Chief. You were a different set of Spartans with a different story to be told. And I personally have outlined on a few occasions, probably half a dozen occasions now, different types of side narrative directions that should be taken for spin-off games that would do well, extremely well among the community, and be immensely popular. The reality is that just right now, ODSTs just aren't high on the agenda. And that's a shame. But I have to admit, I kind of understand it. You have to consider that most of the games that have been released under 343 Industries' tenure so far have hit a bum note in one way or another. It makes sense that they'd focus their efforts on trying to improve the quality of their mainline product before they consider using spin-offs. Because if they can't quite nail down the quality of the mainline product, what's the bets that a smaller contingent team working on side projects are going to nail down a spin-off any better? And of course, yes, things could be said for using external companies or third parties to create these spin-offs, but again, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape, and a lot of bureaucracy involved in doing something like that. I would rather that they nail down the recipe for their mainline games first before they consider exploring spin-off games. But when that time comes, I implore them to use their reason and to give us a follow-up for Halo ODST. Maybe not even following the ODSTs of Alpha 9. We know that the Rookie has since been killed in action, and we know that the other ODSTs of Alpha 9 have almost all been given the Spartan 4 augmentations. So they don't really fit the bill as being ODSTs anymore. But there are countless other squads of ODSTs that could use the spotlight. Countless other stories to be told, countless other battles to be fought. And it would do well to focus in on a single battle or engagement rather than engagements and battles that span huge theatres of war like we get with the Master Chief. Something more intimate, something more focused would lend itself to an ODST story. So ODSTs aren't entirely absent. They are still around. They're still doing what they need to do. They are still in active service. They're just not at the forefront. But in order for that to happen, we need a new ODST game. We need quite a few different spin-off games, if I'm quite honest, because it would bring a fan favourite back to the forefront. And if after all of this you need any more proof that ODSTs are a fan favourite, keep your eyes peeled on November the 1st, because it's coming in hot. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.